Hey, this is the 1 minute warning. We are about to start our meeting. Leona's going to be a little bit late, and Warden Vanderwall sends his regrets. So we begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as a gathering place of the First Peoples and their ancestors who are entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the county is committed to working with Indigenous people and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. We need a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Phil, seconded by Mike, that the agenda for the December 13th, 2023 meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee Advisory Committee be adopted. Any errors or omissions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Is there any disclosure, pecuniary interest, and general nature thereof of any item on today's agenda by any member of the committee? Seeing none, we'll note that. Now, a motion to adopt the minutes. Moved by Fred, seconded by Jim, that the minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting held October the 4th, 2023 be adopted. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Deputations and presentations, there aren't any. Briefings, we're going to have reports to the Planning Advisory Committee. The sergeant isn't here unless that's him coming.
So could we just take a 5-minute recess? Apparently the Zoom links, they do not have access to them. So I just need to get them access. So if we could just take a 5-minute recess. Sorry.
We have worked so hard. We're going to take a 5-minute recess until we get things done. And that will be the only break that you get all morning. So enjoy it.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Okay, we're ready to call the meeting back to order. And we were at reports to the Planning Advisory Committee. And on our screen, we have with us Sergeant Brian Newell of the OPP East Region SAVE team. And he's going to do a briefing for us regarding safety and bylaw enforcement. Good morning, Brian, and welcome.
Hello, well, thank you. Good to see everybody.
Okay, we can hear you loud and clear, so please go ahead.
Okay, little misunderstanding about my briefing as far as bylaw enforcement goes. So I wasn't sure exactly what was being sought for this presentation. I'm Sergeant Byron Newell. I'm with East Region SAVE team with the OPP, which stands for Snowmobile ATV Vessel Enforcement. And we enhance and conduct patrols, educate and do enforcement throughout East Region, all of our 16 detachment locations. So we enhance those areas in the areas of trails and waterways, and support those detachments. So we're dealing with this trail areas in the Frontenac County area. And in that area, our detachments in Frontenac County, they don't have an active patrol. They don't have any ATVs. So we do a lot of patrols and help support that area. I have a team of 5 constables and I'm the sergeant, and we get deployed and focus our patrols depending on where we're needed and where there's the highest need for police involvement and activities. So that just gives you a brief overview of what we do and where we locate our resources. As far as creating any bylaws, I've been involved. We have a few communities within East Region that own trails and have created their own bylaws, which basically enhance some of our powers and some of their authorities and powers and some of the safety rules on their trails that the Off-Road Vehicle Act or Regulation 316 of the Highway Traffic Act doesn't cover. So I may be able to help you with some of those questions today. And where the OPP, what you need to do and what's required in order for the OPP to help enforce your trails and any rules that you may have under your bylaw. So that being said, I'd like to just pose a question out there to, or questions from anybody on the board or the council, or something more that you'd like me to clarify either in our role or our participation as far as the bylaws go that need to be implemented, or other information that you might be requesting.
Okay, we'll open it up to the committee, and Fred Fowler's got our first comment or question.
Yes, thank you very much for coming, Sergeant. The Off-Road Motor Vehicle Act, is that the act that you lay most of your charges under when you're on the trails?
So there's actually 2 different acts. So the Off-Road Vehicle Act deals with off-road only. So either private or crown land, and it stipulates all the regulations, authorities and rules for off-road vehicles on the trails basically. And these would be whether they're privately owned trails or municipality owned trails or crown land. And it differs quite a bit as far as the rules, responsibilities, regulations, what's required, what's not required, compared to the Highway Traffic Act, which also deals with off-road vehicles under Section 316. So it sets out specific rules and regulations, what types of vehicles are permitted on roadways. And it also gives authorities to municipalities to authorize or prohibit certain off-road vehicles from being on roads or highways. So those are the two acts that we mainly deal with, and interesting timing with this meeting as well, because I actually have a meeting tomorrow, and our provincial coordinator for both off-road vehicle and motorized snow vehicles is meeting with the Ministry of Transportation and off-road OFATV and stakeholders to discuss implemented changes with the Off-Road Vehicle Act so that it's more consistent and with the Highway Traffic Act and Regulation 316. Because there's a lot of things covered under 316 that aren't covered under the Off-Road Vehicle Act. A lot more power and safety authorities for safety under the Highway Traffic Act than there is under the Off-Road Vehicle Act. So that's something in the works that is going to be implemented so that they are more consistent. And I could discuss that a little bit further if you would like. But I hope that answers your question, or if you'd like some clarification.
Thank you very much. One other thing is, if you find somebody that's you're going to charge under one of these acts, does it end up going before the Ontario Court of Justice?
Yes, so both the Highway Traffic Act and the Off-Road Vehicle Act, they're both provincial acts. So we can issue provincial offense notices and tickets. We do have short form wordings for both, so it would go before the provincial court and they have an opportunity. However, if you'll find that in the Off-Road Vehicle Act, there's a lot of offenses, or there's a lot of things that aren't offenses. So such as, give an example, there's no speed limit requirement on trails off-road. There's no sign requirement. So if you actually put up a stop sign at driveways and such, there's no authority, there's no offense to stop at those signs. So those are given too, but there's many others. You know, there's no licensing requirement as far as having any type of driver's license or a course like with Motorized Snow Vehicle Act. There's no age restriction or horsepower restriction. So this is all dealing with off-road. So we wouldn't be able to give a ticket for any of those things. But if you were the owner or operator of the trail and you had that authority and you could create bylaws. So those are some bylaws that you could create for those trails. You could set up a speed restriction. You could set up maybe an age restriction, maybe a horsepower restriction. You could even put restrictions in there where you would allow ATVs on certain trails and not on others. You could have a sign restriction, so if they disobeyed a stop sign. And in order for us to enforce those laws under your bylaws, you would have to write us into your bylaw as being the operator, giving us the authority to enforce those. And then with that being done, there's two ways of doing it. You would have to talk to your lawyers about it. You could either get it so you're able to have your bylaws written on a provincial offenses notice that is created by the province, or you create your own bylaw tickets in which they would have their own wording and fine system. So those are two ways of doing it. You'd have to go through your lawyers to determine which would be better for your municipalities and how you want to have that set up. But those would be the two methods in which we write our tickets and then how they get processed through the courts.
Okay, Judy.
Along that same line, how many offenses have been charged in the past year by the OPP to anybody on our trails or in previous years?
Or do you have that information at hand at the moment?
I don't have that information. I know it was requested when I was first contacted, and that is information that's collected and then I know as far as collisions go, it goes to the Ministry of Transportation, and now they have a stat gathering collective that gets entered. So you'd have to we'd have to have an analyst, and it'd have to be approved through the OPP to release those statistics, which would take some time. And also, Ministry of Transportation are now in control of those statistics, so they would have to be requested through the Ministry of Transportation as well. I believe my staff sergeant had provided that contact in order to get those statistics. Maybe somebody can acknowledge that's been done.
Richard's nodding his head over here.
Yes, thank you, Staff Sergeant. We have received the information, made contact with MTO, and they're in the process of compiling the information as requested.
When we get that information, it will come back to the committee. Judy?
Just in your general opinion in that, would we be looking at a low number as in under a dozen, or under a higher number such as over 100 in your experience in that along that trail?
So along that trail, I don't think it's going to show a lot of tickets being issued. I know our main, it tends to be the same type of infractions and offenses across the trails in the region and even across the province, whether you're dealing with motorized snow vehicles or off-road vehicles. So some of them tend to be like on the motorized snow vehicle side, are people not getting their trail passes, muffler offenses. So they put on aftermarket mufflers, which is an offense. You're not allowed to modify and put on those aftermarkets. That's what make those motorized snowmobiles really loud and annoying to people. And then also trespassing. So on the snowmobile side of things, we find they go off trail and they end up in farmers' fields, or if the trail cuts across a farmer's field, they go off the trail and then they're in farmers' fields causing damage, or even going into other people's private areas causing damage. Those tend to be our three. And then also speeding. We actually do speeding enforcement on the motorized snow vehicle side, right on the trails, and we write those tickets as well. On the off-road vehicle side, there's more limitation without a bylaw. Like I said, there's no speed limit, there's no sign offenses. There is a careless driving charge in the Off-Road Vehicle Act. There's still trespassing we can lay an offense for. Again, it helps if we're written into a bylaw on that. Otherwise, the actual authority that owns the trail, they would have to give some type of agent authority to the police so that a member from that municipality wouldn't have to appear in court on those trespass charges. It's hard for me to give a number. Like I said, I didn't do any statistical gathering, but just anecdotally from what I know that area of trail, we would still get on the off-road vehicle side again, where we have problems with, no matter where you are, you're required to have insurance. It has to be plated. You need your documents. You have to have a helmet. It has to be worn properly. We find helmet offenses are a large one. We get few liquor offenses, and then we get some document offenses. So some of these municipal owned trails, they're requiring people to get trail passes, which there is not a trail pass fine unless it's written under the bylaw. But if they're required to get a trail pass in order to be on those municipality-owned trails, they can be charged with trespassing. So we end up writing a fair number of those as well. That gives you an idea of the types of tickets that we end up writing. But as far as the numbers, it's hard for me to answer that. I know they're pretty low in that section, however, though.
Okay, couple more comments, and go ahead, Mike.
Sergeant, as far as you know, has there been any fatalities or serious injuries involving ATVs or motorized vehicle and pedestrians on those trails?
Not to my knowledge. I know the serious and fatalities are very low in that area. And I do have statistics more broad provincially, and where we find most of the collisions are happening on private property and highways over the trails. Now I know there's been talk about the trail being a multi-use trail, so that you would have motorized and also people walking, perhaps skiing in the wintertime. We have a very similar trail up in the Lanark County, Renfrew County area, the OVRT. And I know they have only, since they have been implemented, they only have had one serious collision involving the public on that, where it was a personal injury and no fatalities.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, thank you very much for your presentation. And maybe we could have you come once a year and bring us an update.
Yes, I think we really need to sort out where the statistics are going to be coming from and should be coming from. I know it's a lot of work on our end, and we have to have an analyst gather those statistics and put them together in an report, or whether or not the Ministry of Transportation are going to continue to take control of those statistics, and then they would get those reports for you. And that would answer your questions a little better as to how many collisions, types of collisions are occurring on the trails, as well as offenses and tickets being written.
Sorry, our next briefing is not able to be with us, but has given us a letter, which I think I'll read into the record. I think everyone has a copy of this. This is from Trans-Canada Trail, and the writer is Matthew Roy, who was to be with us. So, dear Richard and members of the Planning and Economic Development Committee, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Matthew Roy, Vice President, Chief Trail Experience Officer at Trans-Canada Trail, a key partner in fostering and improving the KMP Trail within your beautiful region. As you know, our organization oversees Canada's national trail, the world's longest at 28,000 kilometers. Last year, we secured $55 million over 5 years from the federal government, enabling investments in infrastructure and support for over 500 provincial, territory, and local trail groups. This includes partnerships within communities across Canada, including the County of Frontenac. Our investment in the KMP Trail since 2013 totals $472,700, a combination of federal dollars, Pan Am funding, and generous philanthropic contributions, all of which have facilitated the creation of this vital and treasured asset. We have closely monitored your decision to launch a consultation process to extend ATV access on the KMP Trail from Verona to Harrismith. After reviewing your reports, I felt compelled to write and provide historical information while clarifying our position. In 2023 and 2024, Trans-Canada Trail provided $343,000, inclusive of the Pan Am Fund, to the county and to establish the Frontenac KMP Greenway. From 2009 to 2019, our organization exclusively funded the development and completion of Greenway trails. Your original application explicitly stated that TCT would contribute $343,000 in funding to your county to create a dedicated Greenway. Had the original concept plan indicated that in the future, summer motorized use would be permitted, the county would not have received funding from Trans-Canada Trail. In 2018, upon learning about a potential change in usage on the KMP Trail in Verona, we sent an official letter affirming our position for the trail to remain a greenway. In 2019, the Board of Directors of TransCanada Trail reviewed and approved our current Greenway principles. During the same period, we collaborated with the county to ensure general support from all users, the provincial government, and the engineering involved in moving the route of the TransCanada Trail heading to Charlotte Lake from Road 38 to the trail to be developed. In making this decision, we considered the best and safest routes for non-motorized trail users, ensured that etiquette rules were implemented and enforced, and confirmed a strong majority of users were supportive of the decisions. The committee is seeking more this is funding considerations. The committee is seeking more clarity about the previous comments provided about TransCanada Trail reviewing any contribution agreements with Frontenac County, should the county make any changes in permitted uses. As you may be aware, TransCanada Trail is supporting a capital bridge replacement project further north from the section under review at Elbow Lake with a contribution of $60,000. This bridge is an emergency replacement and is being funded primarily by Frontenac County with support from TransCanada Trails, OFSC, and OFATV. The committee is concerned that that contribution may be clawed back. Are you able to provide any additional comment or clarity from the TransCanada Trail perspective? I want to reassure the committee that for this specific project, considering the nature of the infrastructure and the need for a bridge for all trail users, TransCanada Trail does not have the intention to use or apply the provisions included in the contribution agreement. We will not cancel or request reimbursement of the contribution made to the project. With this clarification, a decision to change the permitted use to include summer motorized vehicles would impact how we review funding applications for future projects. When assessing potential funding for projects on mixed-use trails, allowing both motorized and non-motorized usage, we consider a variety of factors to inform our decision. Extent of community support, part of a provincial cycling hiking network, alternate route for non-motorized users, etiquette, enforcement and safety, maintenance capabilities and upkeeping trail quality, quality of the experience for the non-motorized users, matching funds contributions from the motorized communities. Official position. We understand that the decision regarding permitted uses on the trail ultimately rests with the county. However, in alignment with our Greenway principles, we recommend that the section of the trail remains a Greenway. After reviewing the recent reports, it's evident that the community is divided on the decision. Drawing from past experiences, we anticipate that this division will result in persistent conflicts and complaints, necessitating staff involvement to address these ongoing issues. The other concerns raised in the report pose significant challenges that should be resolved before making any decisions regarding a usage change. This is particularly crucial in areas such as maintenance, etiquette, enforcement, the quality of life for nearby residents, and the overall experience for non-motorized users. Allowing summer motorized vehicles on the trail would inevitably alter the experience for visitors and needs to be considered. Furthermore, the impact on the trail from a maintenance perspective would be significant, as observed in other jurisdictions in Canada. Allowing summer motorized vehicles not only affects the experience and enjoyment of existing trail users, such as hikers and cyclists, but also necessitates careful consideration for altering the trail to accommodate ATV use. Understanding how this use will alter the trail's maintenance requirements is crucial to ensure its viability and safety for all users. TransCanada Trail is dedicated to supporting the county in shaping policies that align with principles of adaptation to climate change, active transportation, accessibility, and sustainable tourism. As your committed partner, we are prepared to participate in the policy review process, providing valuable support, data points, and evidence-based insights. We appreciate this opportunity to share our perspectives on this consultation. And it's signed by Matthew Roy. Okay, do you want to go ahead? Oh, We do have Matthew online now if there's any questions with anything that was read in the letter. Welcome, Matthew. There you are. Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments for Matthew based on the letter that was just read into the record? Judy?
Yes, thank you very much for the letter and that. And I know it was focused towards the ATV access and that. Did you have the similar concerns with snowmobiles in impacting pedestrians and cross-country skiers and others and that?
So we are starting to see the same concern arising for snowmobile and pedestrian use during winter time. It's kind of new on our side because usually the winter trail are either designated as a snowmobile trail or cross-country skiing trail or fat biking trail. Now we see more and more trail that has those mixed use, and there's a big challenge on speed limit, regulation of speed limit, because just in most cases, the snowmobilers were there prior to the walkers or the cross-country skiers. So they are the one that had established a rule on the trail during winter time.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much and sorry for the technical difficulties. Otherwise, you could have read your letter instead of me.
You did a pretty good job.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Have a good day. All right. We are now going to move to the report. Who's going to speak to this? Richard, are you going to? Yes. Multitasking. We think that's the best way to go.
I'm not, so just to present the information report, it's a follow-up report to the items requested by the committee after the July 5th public meeting. The statistics from Ministry of Transportation haven't come in, but I did provide the Ontario-wide statistics in terms of injury and fatality as part of it. As we said, it's a customized request with the ministry, so it's a bit of a onerous process as we have requested it for the first time. I don't really have too much to present in the report, so I'm happy to field any questions associated with it.
Okay, that's a good place. Fred, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you very much. I was looking at the stats in the report, and I noticed that there's more off-highway injuries and deaths than there are on the highway. Now, I guess this is for ATVs only.
That's correct. This is for ORVs, so it would also include Jeeps that are or Jeep style vehicles that are permitted to be used as off-road recreational vehicles. So it covers a range of off-road recreational vehicles, yeah, and includes two-wheeled off-road recreational vehicles as well.
Yeah.
Side by sides, is that what you mean by the Jeep kind of thing?
Yeah, I just. There is a small Jeep type ATV. I've seen it, and it's just like a little Jeep, but it's a lot smaller, and it's classified as an off-road vehicle. Just one other thing, also in the report, it mentions that there's almost probably annually there's more ATVs being purchased by people and used on the roads as well. So I find that's important, like these two factors, on highway and compared to off highway and injuries and things like that. I just wanted to make that statement.
Are any of those in Frontenac County specifically, or is that across Ontario or Canada?
So the numbers provided here come from 2020 Ministry of Transportation report that was public, and so I was able to access that information and compile it. So it's across Ontario, the numbers that you're seeing in the report here. And for the ORV vehicle types, that whether they were being used on highway and potentially in municipalities where they are permitted, or where they're not permitted, but were discovered on highway. For example, in one of my conversations, in areas where municipalities haven't allowed ORV vehicle types to be on the road, sometimes they will make hasty decisions in order to not get caught using the road to get to where they want to go, and they might use speed or aggressive behavior in order to try to get away or not be seen. And so that's something that probably contributes to the on-highway collisions.
Thank you. At the previous meeting, I was very curious about the insurance aspect, and different people offered up information, but it seems in this report that the 15 million is for property damage, not personal injury. Am I reading that right?
Liability insurance.
So this is liability insurance. So it would cover if there was a claim brought against the county and it was in an area that is a part of our partnership with the OFATV, their liability insurance would kick in prior to our insurance to cover off any claim costs.
Okay. Another part of the report, and that on page 7 of it, indicates almost a fear factor, and that when trails have motorized vehicles on them with a high proportion of seniors trying to access the trails, and that in particular, could you expand on that piece? That's the third paragraph.
Is that seniors driving the ATVs or walking?
No, that's walking, and that higher proportion of seniors begin accessing the trail in a location frequented by snowmobiles, ATVs, and cyclists. And there's conflicts and safety issues with that. So there's a duty of care that was mentioned back in the insurance aspect of it, and there has to be a reasonable duty of care in that put on by Frontenac County for being the owners of the trail. And then it speaks to basically much higher risk for the seniors to use that trail.
My apologies. I'm looking at the side by side here in the report, and so I'm not sure what page it is under. Do you know what heading it's under?
It's under the 4th heading, and that which is status of Verona ATV access pilot.
Correct. Okay.
Okay, and then just the 3rd paragraph before we get to point number 5, which is additional use data.
Correct. So that is those were comments provided by the CAO of the Township of South Frontenac in the covering report for the Verona Housing Master Plan. And so I can't speak to those comments specifically, but I would assume that what they're suggesting there is if there's a high volume of seniors associated with the intended housing development in a small area along the trail, that there needs to be intention built around what permitted uses or what design features are in place to ensure that there's as little conflict as possible. And so I think that's, if I were to interpret those comments, that's how I would interpret them.
Okay. And yep. It's regarding looking at the stats, because I do like looking at data, and I sorted it out a bit. And to me, there was a very clear drop in walking as soon as the motorized was increased in the more northern area. There's almost a line, am I right, at Hinchbrook Station, Titchburn, South Lake South. South Lake North and Clarendon, that there's a significant drop in the pedestrian traffic at that point in time. It didn't impact the cyclists nearly as much, but an inverse proportion increase in the motorized vehicles. And that was consistent. And this was in the summer months, not even worrying about snowmobiles, but with the summer months, and considering that, well, it was just statistically significant all the way through. And that both from the total perspective and these May, September pieces and that. Am I wrong in that? Because it's just black and white to me that there's, when you have more motor vehicles, there seems to be fewer people walking percentage wise, not just volume percentage wise.
I think that's an interesting view of it. My interpretation of the data would be that these are more rural areas specifically, especially and further from the city of Kingston. So a lot of the trail use is increased because of a proximity to population. And so as we move further north, we move further away from population. The Charlotte Lake North counter has a significant portion of pedestrian activity as it's located close to a population center in where pedestrians use the trail and share the trail. So it's but the real numbers are much lower than the real numbers further south, and that's because further south we don't permit motorized use south of Verona, and so and because there's a higher population number up there. So those are interpretations that I would propose to be considered as well when you take a look at the data there. Because Hinchinbrook is really not close to much any of our populations at all. It's that counter is placed so that we can understand the approach to placing our trail counters was to figure out how our trail use is dispersed. And so what we want to see is when we have a lot of trails reaching capacity closer to Verona or Harrowsmith, or even in Charlotte Lake, maybe we can help encourage through marketing or trail development people to take longer trips to access the trail in more remote areas so that we can disperse the use elsewhere. And I think we've seen year over year at Hinchinbrook and at Clarendon, we've seen a significant increase in cycling, but we haven't quite got that same increase from a pedestrian standpoint.
Okay, Fred has his hand up next.
Just a very simple question. You speak of counters, how do they work, and just describe them?
Just very briefly, we have 10 eco counters that are called multi-counters, and they are placed at these locations throughout the trail. They use infrared technology. So when you go through the beam of the infrared technology, it commits a count, but it also has loops in the ground in front of the counter, so that based on weight and speed, it determines whether you're a bicycle or an ATV or like a car, essentially, and that's how it determines. There's probably some room for error between a speedy cyclist and a slow-moving lighter ATV, but this gives us a reasonable picture of what we're seeing out on our trails.
Does it pick up wildlife at all, or is there a way to decipher them?
Yes, sometimes if a herd of deer were to go by, or if there was a farmer. The Verona North counter, for example, has a significant pedestrian account, and part of that is I've discovered that the school there does their cross country practices in front of the counter every day at the same time, so that bumps it up a little bit.
Okay, Judy.
Just since you mentioned Hinchinbrook and that, I was actually surprised that their statistics, when you go to the individuals, and as I said, I looked more at the percentages, but I also had the individual numbers. They were higher than Harrowsmith North and Verona South, and that for individuals using the area, and yet their walking was dramatically lower. And that's fairly consistent that in 2022 and also in 2023, and that they still were higher in individuals using the trail than Harrowsmith North. And they were close to Verona South and that for the stats. So it's not just being close to the city and that but it spoke very strongly to me when I looked at the percentage of it.
Yeah, I think type of use goes a little bit further for some people, and I think speaking as someone who rides a bicycle, you always want to explore new areas to ride your bicycle, and it's less of a place of habit. Where I think if you walk your dog, you go to the same places to walk your dog on a regular basis, and so there's a different habit between the user groups that you could dive into and think about. It's a rabbit hole I've been down before, and I probably will be down again.
I think the good thing that statistics show us in all forms is this trail is well used. So unless there's more questions on this, Leona, I see your hand almost up.
Just interesting from the Trans-Canada conversation, and it sounds like withdrawing potential funding for the future and kind of noting that in some of the information. That would also go towards future marketing efforts you want to do, tourism efforts you want to do, if they pull that funding. Do you think?
We don't receive regular funding. Everything's application based and everything is project based with Trans-Canada Trail. For example, we are in the same conversations with Mr. Roy from Trans-Canada Trail about getting the information for this meeting together. I'm also having a conversation, getting a letter of support written for a tourism grant to support a much larger network of rail trail tourism involving the KMP, the OVRT, and the Cataraqui Trail. And so as I'm looking to work with my municipal partners across those boundaries, Trans-Canada Trail has indicated interest in being involved in providing a letter of support. So as he mentioned, there's a criteria laid out in the letter. And so I think that factors into probably the amount of funding or the types of projects they might fund, but I think they are still going to remain a partner for us going forward.
Okay, Jim.
Just a brief question on the bylaw that we have. The OPP seemed to indicate that we didn't have one. In fact, when your report indicates we do, so I found that a little disconcerting to say the least. So have the OPP been given copies of that, and do they review it? And what's the process for looking to reevaluate that bylaw and maybe get input from some of the enforcement groups?
So the OPP has not had a formal review of the bylaw. The bylaw was put in place, but we have not had a chance to engage with them on sort of specifics of enforcement of the bylaw. And so what we, as part of the conversations associated with this, we've been, that conversation has now been set to take place in the new year, along with other enforcement entities as we go forward. The bylaw is relatively new, and 2023 is meant to be an educational period where we weren't really focused on enforcement, but more about getting the information out. However, since we've approved the bylaw, we've also found some gaps in it, and we're hoping to review that as part of our management review process that we had planned for the winter of 2024. So you'll probably see information about that at this committee, as well as with comments from enforcement entities at a future meeting in the next few months.
I was wondering that same question, Jim. Judy.
I really appreciate that comparable trail section of number 7 that reviewed many of the other trails that are around Canada. And what caught my eye in one of them, that they mentioned a 20-kilometer speed limit, which seemed worthwhile. That might be a good safety factor in that. And another one, the Rum Runners in Nova Scotia, and that really did have an economic impact study, and that they could translate $780 per person visit to their trails and stuff like that. And that's some of the things that we were looking for to see what true impact we're getting, because we've seen studies that 17% increase in tourism with ecotourism versus which is walking and cycling and things of that nature, active tourism, which is completely in line with what the vision of this trail was when the county first started with it in 2009, and that it was meant to be a greenway trail. And just looking through it and that, it was very interesting in that how many of them really aren't supportive of ATVs and a few of them that are in that, but it was very helpful information that to review. And I just still wondering about any demonstrated economic indicators that we have and that are new since the start of this trail, not just sustaining our existing businesses.
In the previous report delivered in I guess it's 2023-079 that was delivered for the July 5th meeting, we talked about a few investments that we've seen in the trail, the Clarendon Station accommodation, the Kick and Push Brewery, as examples of businesses that want to be located to and capitalize upon the trail as part of their business plans. So we're seeing those economic impacts take place, but we have not budgeted or had the resources to conduct a full-scale economic impact study, and probably part of that is because we for us at the county, we're still considering finishing the trail, and we're not necessarily been evaluating that finishing that unfinished project, but perhaps we need to do some evaluation as we go forward. And I believe County Council is going to have a conversation about that in the future, because there was a notice of motion about commissioning some sort of economic study or return on investment study that will be discussed by council.
Okay. All right. Good conversation. You should stay there, Richard, because we're going to the request to extend the ATV access from Verona to Harrismith. And that was in our package with two options, option yes or option no. And we need to make a recommendation, which will then go to County Council for the final decision. Who wants to start? Fred. As a committee, I don't know, do we need recorded votes?
That's totally up to you. A recorded vote is marked in the minutes of who voted yes and who voted no.
We can do that if that's your request. Okay. All right.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Likely
Go
what
ahead.
you need is someone to make a motion for one of the options to be voted upon. So someone has to propose a yes or someone has to propose a no, and that have that seconded.
All right. Who's proposing what? Fred.
I propose that we vote against this and not vote. And I just need a seconder for that.
Okay. So yours is option no. Okay. Seconder, Judy. Okay. So all those in favor of saying, oh, right.
So if
Sorry.
Councillor Fowler is requesting a recorded vote.
Yes.
Yeah, not.
So Councillor Fowler.
So the vote is yes for no. Right. So I just want to make that clear.
That's right.
That if you say yes, you're voting.
So you would
to
want to say yes here.
Yes, I'm against it.
No, if you say yes, you're voting that you're in
You're voting.
favor of the motion
Okay.
being that the committee recommend to County Council not to extend ATV access.
Yeah, that's what.
That's, so you are a yes. Mr. Leonard? And Mr. McIntosh?
No.
And Leona? Against? No?
Yes.
Oh,
She
yes.
said yes.
Yes, for the no.
Mr. Hay?
I'm a no for a yes. No. I'm
No.
voting no.
No.
Yes.
And Deputy Warden Smith?
I'm a yes.
So that is carried on a vote of 5-2.
Okay.
So now you need to keep, so that is basically a motion to amend the motion to remove option 2. So you're now voting on the motion as amended.
Okay, all those in favor on the motion as amended? Opposed? Carried. And now we vote on the motion.
Sorry, we need a mover and a seconder for the motion.
Moved by Mike, seconded by Phil. Which motion are we moving now?
So you're now, sorry, that was the motion to move the motion as amended. So you're now moving the amended motion, which is that the committee recommends to county council that they not extend ATV access.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Moving on. Request for access across the KMP Trail at Coal Lake.
So we just need a mover and a seconder to put the motion on the floor before discussion takes place.
Fred moves it. Leona seconded. Shall I read the motion? Sure. Okay. The motion is resolved that the Planning and Economic Development Committee received the KMP Trail Report, request for access across the Frontenac KMP Trail at Coal Lake, part of Lot 9, Concession 2, being Part 1 of Registered Plan 13R 22990, Geographic Township of Hinchinbrook, Township of Central Frontenac, and further that in accordance with bylaw number 17, 1995, the Council of the County of Frontenac pass a bylaw to declare the subject land surplus for the purpose of granting a right-of-way over lands occupied by the KMP Trail for the purpose of formalizing access to this property. And further that the warden and clerk be authorized to execute agreement of purchase and sale and all other documents required to complete the purchase of the additional identified properties of interest for the extension of the KMP Trail between Clarendon Station and the boundary with Lanark County in amounts not to exceed the parameters approved by council. Discussion. Dimitri's here to talk to us, answer questions.
I'll still answer questions on this one.
Okay.
But he's doing the next presentation.
So we have two people to answer any questions or comments. Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you, Dimitri. That was a hard job. You're just ready for the next briefing. Okay, Dimitri's going to talk to us about the report 244, 251.
Yes, thank you. And good morning. My name is Dimitri. I'm one of the planners with the County of Frontenac. So today I'm here to talk to you about South Frontenac's official plan amendment number 25, which deals with implementing policies for additional dwelling units. Next slide, please. So on September 19th of this year, South Frontenac Council adopted official plan amendment, which I'll refer to as OPA number 25 to permit and define and regulate additional dwelling units. The reason why this is before you today is because Frontenac County is the approval authority for all municipal official plan amendments. Therefore, it needs to go through this committee before it goes to council for final approval. Next slide, please. So what is an additional dwelling unit? An additional dwelling unit is a self-contained dwelling unit or a residential area, I guess, within that has its own kitchen, bathroom facility, sleeping area, and it's located generally within the principal dwelling or within a detached accessory structure that's located on the same lot as the principal dwelling. So you could have an in-law suite, for an example, a basement apartment, an accessory apartment. Those are some of the common names associated with additional dwelling units. Next slide. So in accordance with the Planning Act and standard planning processes for official plan amendments, the South Frontenac planning team did a public meeting as part of their public consultation on April 4th, 2023. And they also did a technical consultation with the relevant technical agencies that are that deal with planning matters in the area. At the public meeting, 8 members of public were registered and only 1 spoke. In terms of the technical agencies that were consulted, it was the County of Frontenac, the 3 conservation authorities that manage watersheds in the area, as well as the township's public works department and the township's building services department. So on the next slide, we will talk about the main issue that came out as a result of the public meeting, as well as the background information prepared by South Frontenac staff. The main issue, of course, is servicing. That is really the limiting factor in our region when it comes to intensification or the creation of more residential units or more things on a specific lot. The reason for that is because there are no municipal sewage treatment facilities in the township. There is municipal water service, but it's only limited to Sydenham. A majority of the township also sits on what's known as a highly vulnerable aquifer or aquifers, or also known as HVAs. And these areas are particularly sensitive to contamination and anything related to contamination and extraction of water. So it's very important that when you consider development on HVAs that consideration is done using sound scientific discourse, as well as making sure that whatever you do on your property or what one person does on their property does not impact their neighbors and the rest of the township. So the main theme of the official plan policies relating to additional dwelling units comes down to the need to ensure that additional dwelling units can be serviced with an adequate amount of water, and that the wastewater that comes from those residential units can be treated appropriately. Next slide. So I'm not going to dive too deep into the actual policies that have been proposed and implemented by the township. They are available in the Township of South Frontenac staff report dealing with this that was attached to the report that we submitted in the agenda package. But in general, these policies will require applicants to prove that additional dwelling units will not impact the quantity of water available in the surrounding areas, and that the sewage disposal systems can adequately accommodate additional dwelling units. I will make a correction here. On page 6 of the report states that for lots that are in existing plans of subdivision or condominiums, the applicants will be required to submit a supporting hydro-G study and a terrain analysis to support additional dwelling units. That's actually incorrect. What it should say is that for lots in existing plans of subdivision, the applicant and the lot owner will need to submit a letter of opinion from a qualified professional. The hydrogeological study and the terrain analysis only applies to lots in new plans of subdivisions or plans of condominiums. So just a minor correction to one sentence on page 6 of the report. We will add an addendum to the report that is in front of you that will go to Township Council or County Council to clarify that. All of these policies that were put together by township staff were done so in assistance with a qualified hydrogeologist who helped to guide them on the appropriateness of the policies and whether or not they were scientifically sound. And then the township staff came up with the implementation methods for those policies. So on the next slide, we're just briefly talking about planning analysis. So our job at the county is to make sure that the official plan amendment meets the requirements of the Planning Act, which is the overarching provincial policy for land use decisions. The provincial policy statement, the county of Frontenac official plan, so our official plan. Overall, we do believe that the policies that were prepared by the Township of South Frontenac are in line with the provincial policy statement and the county official plan, and they were done and amended in accordance with the Planning Act being the law. we believe that the policies addresses the general policy direction that's been put to us by the provincial government, as well as just general good land use practice that relate to the ensuring that municipalities provide a diversity and mix of housing, that long-term economic prosperity of communities is supported through housing, that servicing issues are adequately addressed, and so are public health concerns. So to conclude, on the next slide, we recommend that the committee recommends to County Council to approve bylaw number 2023-73 that adopts official plan number 25. Thank you. Oh, I also have Christine Woods with me here that will help us answer any specific questions related to the policies and implementations.
Excellent. Okay. Judy?
Thank you for this, and I do appreciate the opportunity that this can present to people, and that to redevelop their garage or shed or anything else, or do whatever in that. But it also, when I was reading through it, and that the weak spot is that water and sewer aspect, as you indicated. And I think of the new increases that City of Kingston has provided for the bulk sewage from holding tanks or septic systems being charged 53% increase, and bulk water 65% increase. And I was at my own township council meeting on Monday evening where a licensed septic installer and that pointed out that when a holding tank becomes over full, the KFL&A allows for them to take the lid off for potentially up to 2 weeks for it to spill out until there can be that pump out, because pump outs don't happen at the drop of a hat, even if it's an emergency or an urgency. And the fact that we're on such a vulnerable hydrogeological area, and that it gives me extra pause, and that maybe there should be a higher bar to make sure that there is sufficient monitoring, not just the initial setup, because it's one thing if they set it up, let it get full, let it overflow for a bit before they get it pumped out. This will be very, very bad. So that just gave me a pause that, apparently it was reported by that person that the public health would tolerate something like that. It was shocking.
Put your microphone on, Dimitri.
Sorry, yeah, just to respond to that comment. So I think there is a difference between a class 4 septic system and the way that it functions versus what's considered a holding tank. I'm not sure if we're perhaps just on where maybe you're speaking about the same type of system, but different components. But a holding tank usually does not have an area that it drains into, like a septic bed. So a holding tank is a closed system that needs to be pumped out, and those are only used nowadays in first of all, a lot of them are grandfathered. Second of all, they're only used in situations where where you have an existing lot that has an existing house on it, where a septic system can no longer be installed. So it's kind of like a last resort for sewage services. The way that these policies, the way that we read them, is that you would not be allowed to expand the livable area of a dwelling or add an additional dwelling unit if you have a holding tank, because holding tanks really do provide a limit on what can be done within a house. So I just wanted to kind of respond to that question or to that comment.
Okay, Mike.
I understand all the reservations for the sewage disposal, and I agree with them all. I just have a question. How can an applicant prove that additional dwelling will not impact the quantity of water available in the surrounding area? This seems like broad structure. Is there any quantifiable steps that needs to be done or ticked so that they can prove this?
So through the chair, there are in the provincial guidelines, there are specific guidelines related to water quality tests, usually known as pump tests and recharge tests. So you basically, in one of the ways that an applicant would need to prove availability of water is to have a qualified professional test their well to see what rate that water is coming out of that well at, and to see if it can actually service the proposed development, and then to figure out how quickly that well can recharge after a 6-hour discharge. So there are methods for being able to identify water quantity, but it is something that, of course, there's a lot of unknowns, but there are certainly technical standards for how that is done. Yeah.
So it only applies to their own well, not the surrounding area. That well impacts the surrounding area. This is what it means.
Yeah, that's right. I think I'm not sure if maybe Christine is when you're looking at, do you, for pump tests, do we look at adjacent wells as well, or is the recharge looking at the recharge rate of the well enough to ensure that those nearby properties are not going to be impacted? I'm just not quite sure on the details of those policies.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to respond first, and then Christine can if I don't take it all the way to the finish line. But so it is possible. What you have to do is you have to get agreement from, say, neighboring properties, particularly within they're in a certain distance, to monitor their wells during the pump test. So it is possible, but again, it's not a perfect science because you require the cooperation of your neighbor to do so. Usually people are willing to do it because they don't want you to do anything that's going to impact their well, but that is often part of the pump test process, in order to prove that quantity and the no negative impact to the neighboring wells. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to add to what Sonia said, what the standards that we've put in place that are separate from the policies that Dimitri has been describing, it provides two different scenarios. One is if you have an existing house and existing well, the level of scrutiny that we're requiring is generally less than if you were putting in a new well for the second unit or third unit. And the level of scrutiny will depend on where the property is as well. So if you're in an area like Harrowsmith, which is small properties all on well and septic systems or holding tanks, then we may be looking for, with the advice of a hydrogeologist, to look at those neighboring wells to see what impact there would be. Another thing that a qualified professional would do is look at the well records for the area. So if, for example, a person was not willing to have their well monitored while the pump test was happening on a given property, a hydrogeologist, for example, could look at the well records and see if the wells are even taking the same source of groundwater. Because they might not be. If someone has a shallow well and someone beside them has a deep well, they're not taking the water, and the chance of there being an impact from one well to the other is low. So those are all things that would be taken into account by the professional who does the study.
Okay, Judy?
Okay, as somebody that doesn't rely on well water and that, I catch rainwater with cistern and that, so there's different methods that you're using in the country, but also on the islands, a lot of people use shore wells. And when the water level goes down, if you don't have a deep enough shore well, you're going to be out of water. And some use pipes going out into the bays and they're electrified pipes to keep them from freezing in the wintertime. So just looking at the wells is a challenging science at best, but when we even mentioned about the holding tank aspect, there's probably more holding tanks and septic tanks when you're having homes built near to the water because they're just too close to the floodplain. So they end up with holding tanks. There's a lot of pump outs, and any of the more concentrated areas such as Marysville, it's primarily towards the holding tanks for businesses, et cetera, and that. So that's why I look at the factor of, the costs involved with this, just, having eyes wide open to anybody that wants to expand, and that it really will continue to go up at this point in time. And I think we need to, at a different level, and at the county level, look at what the costs are for the people in the rural communities.
But we have to remember, this is a South Frontenac bylaw that we are looking at the official plan amendment. It's just for South Frontenac. Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was going to be one of my comments. That this is only for South Frontenac. My other comment is that they've asked for a qualified hydrogeologist to confirm that it meets the requirements for water supply. Those costs typically are anywhere from 10 to 50,000. So nobody's doing this lightly. It's going to be a qualified individual that has to verify that things are appropriate based on what data is available. So it'll be less if it's in an existing plan of subdivision where they have a hydrogeological report to rely on with pump tests and all that stuff, and a whole lot more if it's going to be a vacant lot in the countryside. So I think that's the best you can do, but it's probably going to be modified as it goes forward and they start seeing the costs of doing the work.
For the motion, moved by Jim, seconded by Mike. Be it resolved that the County of Frontenac Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee recommends to County Council that bylaw number 2023-73 of the Township of South Frontenac, adopting official plan amendment number 25 to permit, define, and regulate additional dwelling units be approved, and that the official plan of the Township of South Frontenac as amended be further amended as per Township Bylaw number 2023-73 in attachment 1 to report number 2023-130, being official plan amendment number 25 for the regulation of additional dwelling units. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. All right. Now, propose to amend county fee bylaw to update the tariff of fees for land use planning and fees for citizen land use on county-owned property. There we go. Sonia is going to be.
So we
speaking to
just need
this
a
one.
mover and a seconder to get the motion on the floor.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, we usually put the motion on the floor before discussion can
Oh,
happen.
okay. All right. Judy will move it. Phil will second it. Be it resolved that the County of Frontenac Planning Economic Development Advisory Committee recommends to County Council that Schedule C of bylaw number 2023-007 of the County of Frontenac, being a tariff of fees for land use planning, be updated in 2024 to reflect the new tariff of fees included as attachment 1 to report number 2023-132, and that Schedule F of bylaw number 2023-007 of the County of Frontenac, being fees for citizen land use and county-owned property, be updated in 2024 to reflect the updated fees included as attachment 1 to report number 2023-132. Lots of numbers. Discussion. Okay. Judy.
I was just a little surprised at the research average and that being so much higher in several of the instances than what we're trying to propose. And that, so is it a plan that would be looking at in a year or two that we would increase it even more? Because, I can appreciate some places we have never charged a fee, so we're starting lower than the average charged in other areas. But for example, an official plan amendment, the current fee, $1,000, proposed fee, $2,500. The research average is $4,884. And that, which is, we're just basically getting to almost 50%. And that, so I just wondered if we should be doing more, and that, and yet when you look at other places and that, for deposits, and that we're at 5,000, the average is 3,500. Does it all come out in the wash in the end?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it does. With respect to the research averages and the example of the official plan amendment, it all depends on the nature of the official plan for the upper tier. Our official plan is a very high level plan in that we don't apply any land use designations to any of the lower tier municipalities. We leave that up to the townships to put in their official plans what the designations are for on their land. So the likelihood that somebody is actually going to come and amend the county official plan is very, very limited, actually. We've only amended it 3 times, and it's been the county itself that has amended it since it's been in place in 2016. Because somebody would actually have to be looking to amend something pretty significant for their property individually. And it's likely that through the pre-application consultation process, we would probably tell them we wouldn't support it. But they still have the right to apply. So yes, in some cases, the fees are lower, maybe than the average, but I think for the OP in particular, that's just given the nature of our official plan. And then yes, in some cases, the deposits are a bit higher because again, not being a large municipality, we rely a lot on consulting teams to act as peer reviewers for certain studies. And that's where often a lot of the work comes from the more complex applications, is they're required to submit supporting studies. And if they're engineering in nature or hydrogeological, then we have to get a peer reviewer from an outside consulting agency. And that's when it starts eating into the deposit quite a bit. So.
Hey, Jim.
You charge back though the fees of the peer review to the applicant on?
Through measure, yes, we do, but we take a deposit initially, and we draw from that. Whatever is remaining goes back to the applicant. If we deplete the deposit, they have to submit more to us. Yeah, but we do charge everything back to the applicant. It's just it's nice to have a little bit in the bank at first to draw from, so that there's not it doesn't slow things down. Just trying to pay invoices. So,
okay, Jim.
But your proposed fees are over and above the deposit, or is that part of the deposit?
Through Madam Chair, so the fee is separate from the deposit.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor? Carried. All right. Now the next is oh, sorry, Fred.
I've got something I would like to. In section E that we already voted on, I noticed that there's a report. This might be a point of order, I think. I'm looking at the report from Richard Allen, and that was attached to this section. And what I'm concerned about is I'm looking at the last paragraph of the section where it says, and further that the warden, the clerk be authorized to execute agreements of purchase and sale of all other documents required to complete the purchase of the additional identified properties of interest for the extension of the K&P trail between Clareton Station and the boundary within Lanark County in the amount not to exceed the perimeters of approved by council. My concern is pardon? Yeah. Okay, I was just concerned because it didn't have anything to do with the original report and it's stuck in there.
All right.
Sorry, that was actually updated on the agenda. That is an error, and the agenda that went out with the addendum, that recommendation was excuse me, updated. So the it is just now stating that the warden and clerk be authorized to execute the agreements of purchase and sale and all other documents to complete this transaction. The agenda should have been updated.
Mine is not correct then. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. What I read just didn't make sense because it didn't belong.
All right. Okay, so the open farms days, that's a report for information only. And we have communications from a couple of people, and we don't need to do anything with those. So I believe, unless there's some other business, we are at the next meeting, January 30. Oh, Joe's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Yes, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the next meeting date, I want to advise the committee that date is not going to work for staff. We're going
So
to,
we change it.
we'll send a poll out. The following Wednesday is February 7th, I believe. And that time, Richard and Debbie will be at the EDCO conference in Toronto. So they could only attend virtually, which won't work. So if it's okay with the committee, we'll send some dates out, possibly maybe the 5th or 6th is a Monday or Tuesday of that week, or the following week, a Wednesday is the 14th. Because we all want to be at this meeting, and I want to advise the committee to be prepared to roll up your sleeves because we're coming back with our revised work plan. Council, the previous work plan we brought to you was based on the premise that we would have an additional staff person on economic development, and the council did not endorse that in our budget this year. So we're going to come back with proposed changes so we can make it clear to you what we can and can't do next year. And that's not only on the economic development side, but we're already seeing some major projects coming forward in 2024 on the planning side. And we're going to have some staffing issues early next year as well on planning. So just be prepared to roll up your sleeves that day. We're going to really need your input on this. Okay. Thank you.
We might even consider lunch,
I think that would be a good idea.
especially if the new warden suggests it, right?
Oh, lunch it is. Lunch
Whoever that may be. Okay, so the next meeting will be as determined. We will get a doodle poll and see if we can pick the best date to get the.
Clerk is looking at me and I better listen to her. So
No, I'm just asking, do you want to, they're all sitting in the room. Do you want to ask them now? Like, does the 14th work or the
But
13th?
no, there's going to be lots of things scheduled between now and February. And that's good because they're not good
maybe-
for me.
maybe we will send, I think we'll send a poll out now, especially
Yeah.
because Warden Vanderwall, or soon to be ex-Warden Vanderwall, from what I'm hearing, is not here today. So just bear with us and we'll get back. We'll get that out in the next week or two. Thank you.
Okay, so the next meeting to be determined. All right, we need a, right. That's gone. All right. I need a motion to adjourn. Philip and Jim.
I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Yes, yes. It's 2 weeks from today. I heard on the radio coming in. So anybody who hasn't shopped, get to the bank. Good old cash.